Testing. This is the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program interviewing Roy E. Baker, and we're at the Stratford House Nursing Home, and the date is...
Stratford, honey.
What is this?
Merriweather.
Merriweather Nursing Home, and the date is November the 8th, 1972, and it's a Wednesday afternoon, and it's raining outside, Roy.
Right, I know it was.
Roy, what date were you born?
I was born April the 22nd, 1886.
And that would make you how old today?
86 years old.
86 years old. Well, you're just a kid, really.
I'll be 87 next one.
Hey, what was your father's name?
Ira Baker.
Ira Baker.
Ira Baker.
And your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Lydia Mendenhall.
And where were you born?
I was born at Baker's Corner, Indiana.
And where is Baker's Corner?
About 10 miles west of Noblesville and about 4 miles east of Sheridan.
Yeah, and...
it's a little village of about 60 people when I lived there.
Yeah. What did your dad do?
My dad was gravel road superintendent down there for 21 years.
And tell me about your career and how you drifted around and finally got to Wabash.
Well,
you went to school, obviously.
I went to school at Baker's Corner. All schooling I ever had, all I had was 8th grade. You had to pay to go to high school when I was a boy, and we had to have a horse and buggy and drive 4 miles, and my dad didn't have that much money to pay tuition, so I never had any high school education. All I had was 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my education.
Yeah. What'd you do when you got out of grade school?
When I got out of school, I went, and I had a cousin in Indianapolis that was my aunt. I always called her my aunt. And she liked me so well, and I went to Indianapolis when I was about 16 years old to live with her, and I lived with her till I was grown.
Well, you moved to Indianapolis, and what do you do there?
I worked several places there, George. I worked for the old National Motor Company, and worked for the Atlas Engine Works, and several places like that. And I had a friend down there was a barber, and I used to go to his shop and loaf around. That's when I first started to fool around with the barber. He let me shave necks and things like that, and I got started, and I come to Marion then from Indianapolis. A man named Nubs Meredith out on 38th Street in Marion in Washington, and he taught me all the rest.
Barbering.
Barbering. That's how I learned to barber. We didn't have a barber school in those days.
Then when did you come to Wabash?
I come to Wabash in 1914. My brother was a Methodist minister here at the time, and I came over here to visit him for a couple of days, and I've been here ever since 1914.
What church did your brother...
Wesleyan Methodist Church. He was a preacher out.
On Manchester Avenue?
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Yeah. That's the reason I came to Wabash. He was a minister out there, and he lived on Quaker Avenue on the south side.
Did you think of taking up the barbering trade here in Wabash then? Is that what you did, to move to Wabash?
I already had worked in Marion 5 years at the barber business. I worked at Spencer Hotel over there a long time before I came here.
Yeah.
And then I came over here and went to work in the old Tremont.
The Tremont Hotel?
With Red Butler, old Herman Butler, and myself. And we worked there for a fellow named Frank Sampson, and he died. And August Wassman bought the shop. His daughter's out here now in the hospital, Emma. Mm-hmm. Her father bought the old Tremont Hotel barbershop, and we worked for him, I don't remember exactly how many years, and then he sold it to us, and Red and I bought it.
Mr. Wassman was a barber?
He was a barber, yeah.
He was a barber also.
And we bought the shop off of him and ran it for, I don't know how many years we had it. And then I finally sold my interest to Red, and I went to work I stayed there and worked a while afterwards, and then I was to Indiana 12 years. Yeah. And I had a sanitary shop leased right there by the side of the Club Royal for, I think I had it 3 years.
That was on Market Street. The Tremont Hotel was on Market Street between Wabash and Miami Street.
I worked there 28 years, Red and I together.
What was the Tremont Hotel in its heyday? Was it a big hotel, a classy hotel?
Well, at one time it was an awful nice hotel. Mm-hmm. It was considered one of the best places to eat. That's when the traveling men all traveled and carried their samples with them in trunks, you know. They had rooms in the hotel for the sample rooms, they called them, where these traveling men take their samples and display them to merchants, people was buying. And it was really a first-class hotel when I came here, a dandy hotel.
Yeah.
And finally, the man named Fred Brownell and his son-in-law, Lou Hickson, was in the hotel. And after they left, it was sold, or not sold, I guess, or leased to somebody, and it kept, several fellas tried to run it, and it just kept going down there, and it finally petered out. Wasn't much to it.
Did you have was there a bar in the hotel those days?
No. When I come to Wabash, it was Prohibition.
1914?
Yeah, and Prohibition lasted until when did it get?
32.
Oh, that's how long it was dry after I came to Wabash, and because Wabash, the whole country was absolutely dry when I came here.
Yeah. Did those days, what hours did you work in the barbershop?
We worked anywhere from 8 in the morning till I have worked as late as 3 o'clock on Saturday nights. And we got 10 cents a shave when I first started to shave, and I've shaved 50 men on Saturdays lots of times. Most men got shaved every day, the merchants. And there's 10, 15 cents a shave and a quarter for a haircut.
Would they ever slip your tip?
Oh, yes, some of them did. Very few of them, no days.
Sometimes you'd shave and get haircuts up till 3 o'clock Sunday morning?
Oh, yes, lots of times. They'd just pile in there on us, and we couldn't get them out till that time in the morning, and just go right in 17, 18 hours right through.
Would that make a pretty productive day for you then,
Yes,
financially?
that day, when you wasn't too productive, and he's only getting 10 cents a shave.
Well, they offset the days that you didn't get any shaves.
That's right, but we didn't, that 10-cent shave didn't last long, I think, not very long till we started getting a quarter.
Do you remember the number of years that you were here? Do you remember Mark Honeywell?
Oh, mighty well. I've shaved Mark.
Have you?
Yes. He one of the toughest men to shave that ever walked into a barbershop.
Why?
Oh, boy, he had tough whiskers.
Did he?
Oh, he sure did. I remember one time he tucked his head in there at the Indiana when I was working there, and he tucked his head in at the side door out of the lobby there, and he said, Bake, he said, how about getting these hard whiskers cut off? I said, come on in, Mark, I'll take them off for you. Yeah. And I've shaved Mark, and I used to go by his house when I lived on North Wabash Street, and I used to see Mark every day, and Mark was a very friendly fellow to me, always nice to me. I always liked Mark Honeywell.
Would you talk to Mr. Honeywell when he was
Oh,
here?
yes, I've talked to him lots of times.
What would you talk about usually?
Oh, just common conversation about the weather and other things like you generally do when you meet somebody. If something had happened, you'd discuss it, and Mark was a very, very friendly man to me. Always was.
Was he a good tipper?
Yes, Mark always tips you. He gave you a pretty good tip, yeah. Yes, he did. One of the best tippers I ever had in the barbershop was Harold Talbert.
Was he?
He never tipped me at all until Christmas.
Yes.
Then he gave me $25
I'll be darned.
for Christmas.
You remember the start of the Honeywell plant and everything down there on?
Yes, I can remember when that. I guess I can now. Let's see. Can I?
Do you remember any amusing incidents or unusual incidents or anything relative to the plant?
I don't know much. I used to know several fellows worked over there. Harold Rodeball and his brother, and Willard, what was his name? He went to Minneapolis. I think he was treasurer of the company. Don Rodeball is who I was trying to think of. Don and Harold worked over there, and Willard, I think he got to be treasurer of the company. And he said he got to be a millionaire, so.
Must have done all right, though.
And Don Rodeball, too, said he got to be worth $1 million.
Yeah. Well,
That's when they went together, when Honeywell and Minneapolis merged. That's when the boys, they had a few thousand invested in Honeywell's, and that's when they made their big money. Yeah. When they merged, well, boy, they really made it then. They had confidence in Mark, and they put a friends in with him when he.
What do you think as being an outsider and never having worked at Honeywell, what was the feeling in the community towards Mr. Honeywell?
I never heard any ill feeling towards Mr. Honeywell. My daughter worked over there for quite a while. She worked in the office for Marvel Wool Rods.
Yeah. She worked for Marvel?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
She worked there several years for Marvel.
I'll be nice.
And Gene worked over there during a war, my boy.
Uh-huh.
He worked there during the war. And I never heard any comments about Mark Honeywell, but what was all right as far as I was concerned.
I don't mean to insinuate. I just want to know what the feeling of the community was.
I'll tell you
Not saying it was good or bad.
I'll tell you a funny incident happened one time. Now,
what was it?
Levy Murphy, the barber that I worked with in there at the sanitary when I was up there.
That would be the barbershop.
That's up there by the side of the Club Royal.
Right, on Market Street.
And he and Murphy were just the very best of friends. Mark Honeywell.
Mark Honeywell
and Murphy.
Right.
And in those days, nobody ever cut Mark's hair but Murph, because they were just the very best of friends. Uh-huh. And had been from boyhood, I guess. And Mark used to live right up the street from Ira, my wife here, just a few houses right up the street. Uh-huh. And there's an old man here in town named Jake Hoffman, an old Dutchman, and boy, he was a comical fellow. One day, Mark coming in the barbershop, and he's sitting over in one of the waiting chairs waiting to get his hair cut, and Murph was working on somebody else, and Murphy said to Jake Hoffman, he said, Jake, do you know who this man is that's sitting there waiting? Jake said, yes, I know him. Said, he's Mark Honeywell. He said he puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like I do. That's the answer he give old Murph. Yeah. So Mark got a kick out of that. He laughed about it.
Yeah. Well, good. Do you remember the big floods here?
Oh, I was in Marion during a big flood.
1913.
Yeah.
You moved here after
I didn't come here till 14, you know.
How about what's your reaction to the Ku Klux Klan?
I was a member of it.
Were you? How
did
this come about?
Well, just about everybody in town was.
Yeah.
And they come up to Red and I one time.
That's Red
Butler, when we were partners in Tremont, and they said, you boys better join the Ku Klux Klan or you're not going to have any business. Yeah. So we went to one of the meetings one night.
Who was this that was putting the economic pressure on you, Roy?
Well, I don't know what his name was, but it was the Ku Klux Klan representative. Yeah. And he just put the pressure on you. You just couldn't get out of that hall without putting up $10 to join. Yeah. And we did. Red and I both put up $10 and joined it. And the night we went in, they had it out at the park, I believe it was. There was about 500 members out there. Mm-hmm. Went in that night into the Ku Klux. Cost us $10 a piece.
Did you have to wear a costume or anything?
Well, we bought costume, but you had to buy your own. I remember they cost us $6 a piece for these robes. They called them hoods.
And a hood.
Yeah, a robe and a hood.
How did you get to the park from your house?
I don't remember how we got out there.
You didn't put your costume on and then
no, we never.
Park.
I remember one night they come around, notified all of us. Said, I want you to be out at where the old sale barn is now. I've forgotten what they called it out there then. But
was that an airport hangar back in those days?
No, it was before the hangar, I think, before the hangar airport. I've forgotten what was going on out there. I think they had big sales out there, something like that. They said, we're going to have a big meeting. Harding had died.
Harding, the president?
Had died, and they said, we're going to go out there for that reason. And they come around, and I remember this two Ku Kluxers come around to me, and they said, what do you suppose is going to happen? What are they going to do? I said, you suppose we ought to take a pistol with us? And I said, I don't know what you'd want in the pistol, but they said, well, I don't know what's going on out there. They just come around and told us we better get out there tonight. So we did. It was raining, too. I remember that.
Did you take your costume?
We took our costumes with us. We didn't wear them. But we put them on after we got out there. And we stood out in the rain while they burned a fiery cross out there in memory of Warren G. Harding.
I'll be Was there anybody on horseback riding around? Do you remember?
The night that we went in, out at the park, George Biggerstaff was a big shot. He was, I don't remember what they call him, Grand Dragon or something, George Biggerstaff. And he was sitting way up on the hill on a horse, and a beautiful robe on it, on that horse, and he had on a robe and a mask. And Butch Howard was up on the hill with let's see, a trumpet or whatever you...
Butch? Yeah.
Butch Howard.
Yeah. Yeah, he played the bugle.
Blowing a bugle for the bunch that night. The night we went in, Butch Howard was blowing the bugle.
I'll be darned.
And George Biggerstaff was the big shot then.
I hear this name of Jess Price also.
Oh, Jesse Price, yes, I knew him. Didn't he take care of the church up there, Iva, for a long time?
That was but he was one of the promoters of this group or something.
I expect he was.
Yeah.
He was sexton up there at our church, Presbyterian Church, for a long time. He went. I think he left here and went to hire someplace and died over there. I think Jess did.
What do you think killed the Klan off?
Well, I don't know. Leo Byman always told me a cute story about the Klan. You know, the Klan was against Negroes and Catholics and Jews.
Right.
And Leo told a story about one time. Leo was a Jew and a good old boy too. I sure liked him. He said there was a bunch of Ku Kluxers going to a meeting one day, and they went past a farmhouse, and up on the barn was a great big banner stretched across it and said 150% American. Instead of 100, it said 150%. Well, they said, what goes here? Let's stop and see what this guy is, 150. So they stopped him, and he come out the gate. They said, how's come you 100%'s all you can be? He said, how's come you got 150% up there? Well, he said, I'll tell you. He said, you fellas hate Jews, Catholics, and niggers, don't you? He said, yes. Well, he said, I'm 150%. I hate everybody. Old Leo used to tell me he got a big kick out of that.
Yeah, I'll be down. What do you think about the changes, Roy, from the first time you came to Wabash in 1914 up till today?
Today?
What change do you notice most?
Well, I can hardly tell you, George. I don't know. It came so gradually. But I've always liked Wabash. I think Wabash is one of the best smaller towns there is in the country, any place. It's always been that way to me. It's been good to me. Wabash has been good to me. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say for the town. I think it's an awful good town.
What do you think in your lifetime was the greatest thing that had the greatest impact on you? Let me mention a couple. Telephone?
Well...
You remember your first telephone?
I think the first thing we had telephone when I was just a boy. But I think the most wonderful thing that I remember was the first moving picture I ever saw.
What was it?
They showed it in our schoolhouse at Baker's Corner, a little two-room schoolhouse. Somebody was going around over the country showing these films where they had to turn them with a crank, you know. Uh-huh. And it moving pictures. And I remember this fellow was explaining these pictures. Of course, there wasn't no such things as talkies then. He was explaining the picture, and he said, I want you to notice when this next picture come on of this horse tied to this tree, and watch him paw on the ground like a horse does, you know. That stands out in my mind more than anything else is that first picture show.
First movie.
In the schoolhouse down at Baker's Corner. And I remember that more than anything else. And that, as far as the telephone is concerned, I worked on that. A fellow named Charles Jones started that telephone company around there. And
you helped him?
And I worked as a lineman and installing telephones and different things. He was a cousin of mine. His mother was a cousin of my dad.
How about television? Did that?
Oh, I just accepted. I kept hearing about it so much. And first television I ever saw, I was up in Chicago one time and saw it. A neighbor next door to my daughter had a television set, and we went over. That's the first time I ever saw a television picture.
How about radio?
Oh, I don't remember much about that. We always had one. Seemed like forever almost.
How about automobile?
Well, the first automobile I ever owned, I bought it in 1922. It was a Chevrolet touring car.
You remember seeing your first automobile?
Yes, I do. I can remember the first ride I ever had.
What was the occasion?
I went to Noblesville to a doctor, Dr. Harold, down there. He and his brother had a little hospital down there, and he was my doctor. And I went down there to see him one time, and he always liked me. I was about 17 years old then, or 18. I'd come up home from Indianapolis and I went down to see him. He said, I'm going out and make my calls out in the country, Roy. He said, you want to go with me? And I said, sure. He had the first Cadillac I ever saw. It was a touring car, or not a touring car, a car with no top.
Like a convertible or?
No, just
sedan?
an old car with, I think it was 2 cylinders, Cadillac. 2 cylinders, I think's all it had in it. No top, and he had a great big tarpaulin rubber, and when it rained, you stuck your head out under the hole in that, and the rest of it kept the rain off of it, but you had to take it on your head. And I always remember what Doc said. He drank a lot of whiskey, and he finally drank himself to death, incidentally. One of the best doctors they'd ever had around there. He and his brother both. Mm-hmm. But we stopped at a drugstore. I think it was something like that. And he said, I'm going to buy some whiskey. He said, you don't take it, do you, Roy? And I said, no, I don't drink any whiskey. He said, well, I do a little. He said, I'm going to stop and get some. So he stopped and got a bottle. We drove on. We was going down a hill, and all they had in those days was these little old, what was those first lights? Carbide lights on this little old machine. It's a little old Cadillac. And we started down the hill, and the swamps on both sides, and water in there. And those lights didn't make hardly any lights, you know. I remember what the doc said to me. He said, Roy, it looks like the road to hell, but he said we're going to try to make her. So we did. That's the first car I ever saw, and I rode in it, a Cadillac.
Must have been quite a ride.
Oh, it was. I had quite a ride for a boy, 17 years old, and I felt pretty big, you know, riding around.
Hey, does the word blind pig mean anything?
No, I don't. I never heard that.
Never heard that expression, blind pig, for prohibition?
No.
Bootleggers?
I've heard bootleggers, and I've heard... What was the other name they used to call it?
Did you know Fred Reno?
Mighty well.
Did you? Well, you know, Fred promised me before he died that he would do this interview like I'm doing with you. And unfortunately, Fred died before we had the chance to do it.
I was in the hospital with Fred when he was in there sick, and I was too. We was in there together.
Yeah. That wasn't the time that he was tried to commit suicide?
No, I don't. Not that I know of that time, but we laid there and talked about old times. Yeah. And I drank a lot of Fred's moonshine back in those days.
Was it pretty good stuff?
Yeah, it wasn't bad for corn liquor.
Yeah.
And Fred had a brother, Jock. They called him. Jess was his real name, Jock Reno.
Yeah.
He was a star on the old Wabash football team, the WAA they called it. He was one of the ends, and he was a star. He's one of the best that ever lived, Jock was. And he was Fred's brother. I don't think Jock ever did any drinking. I don't believe he ever drank any, because he played football about all that time, and he didn't drink, I don't think.
Is Baker's Corner still there, Roy?
Yes.
Still at Community?
Yeah, I talked to somebody the other day, and they said they're down there. Well, it's my nephew. He travels, and he calls on people and sells them parts.
Go ahead. I can just move in closer. You're
Parts
probably
to repair television. He sells repairs for them, you know. And he's down through Baker's Corner not too long ago, he said. It just about like it. Oh, one store there, just one store. On the corner, a little brick store on the corner, and that's all that was ever there. There used to be, before I was born maybe, or maybe I was just a little boy. There was 2 stores there, but one of them finally quit. This Charlie Jones, I was telling you about, that started that telephone company. He owned this one store in Baker's Corner, and he went to Indianapolis and bought a dynamo and started making his own electricity for his own home. That's the first time I ever saw electric lights was in the house. We lived right next door to him. He started the first electric lights I ever saw at Baker's Corner, and he made it himself with a dynamo.
Do you have any thoughts, now that you're retired, and anything about the past?
Well, I don't know what to be, George. Anything outstanding, I don't know what it would be.
You always enjoyed your life so much here in Wabash?
Oh, yeah, the best years I've had right here in Wabash. The best years I've ever enjoyed was right here in Wabash. Of course, Gene was born in Marion, but he's only about, I guess, 4 years old when I moved to Wabash, something like that.
Wabash is really his home.
And Betty is, of course, was born here.
Well, I think that's great, Roy, and I think your neck's getting a little tired there, and
that's that way all the time.
I think we got a real interesting little session here. And
Betty says she always tells them that her grandmother lived down on Smith Street. Her name was Lynn, Dave Lynn was Betty's grandfather. They lived right on the banks of the Wabash down there on Smith Street. Betty always tells everybody she lives in Chicago now. She was born on the banks of the Wabash and right smack dab on the banks of the Wabash.
Right on the bank.
About 50, 60 feet away from it.
Yeah, now, for the tape, now, who would Betty be?
Betty is married to Vern Larkins now, and Vern is, during the war, they had inspectors. They sent a bunch of inspectors here from Chicago, and Vern was one of them, her husband. There was 5 or 6 of those inspectors came here, and Betty was working for Marvel Walrod at the time in the office, and Vern Larkins met her in the office, and that's how they got started. And they were married and have 2 daughters. They're both school teachers.
Great. Roy, I'm going to close the interview, and I want to thank you for taking your time this afternoon. And,
all right.
all the fun that we've had over the years, and the old pumpkin pie for 19 cents. Remember those days?
Oh, yes, I do.
And all the fun, and many times you've cut my hair when you worked for John Palmer.
Yeah.
And I think it's been great.
Well, you know how much I've always liked you, and I always will. And I told a lot of people, I said, I guess George's about the only one thought enough of me to come out here and see me.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there'd been other people out here, but then they're mostly close relation or something like that.
Maybe I should have a regular route. I should go around and see all the people I know in the nursing homes.
Maybe you should, George.
Maybe I can pick out a bed for myself.
Well, yeah, we get you another one and put it right in there.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's test our film. Let's test our tape now.